Peters has been there since the school was built, and now he's a recluse, and now he's 90 years old. As Mercedes continued to speak, Rosa felt bad and her hair stood straight. When he thought about that day, ghosts appeared in his mind. As soon as he reached the school, he left Mercedes and reached his classroom. Now the road was crowded, and when he reached the part where room 12 was, he looked around the hall. The other students blocked his view, but he could see the door of room 13. With a sudden movement, instead of going to room 12, he went to room 13. Now the path was deserted, and he was only a few steps away from the 13th class. There was no number on the door, and the glass was black from the inside. It was impossible to see inside the room. It seemed that Rose's heart started to beat fast with anger. He tested the door handle. The door would not open, and it was locked. Feeling a little scared, he turned back and walked towards room 12. At the end of the hall, the same hairdresser as Peter was standing, and his piercing black eyes were staring at him. It was strange that he didn't seem angry like last time. He quickly entered room number 12 and sat down on the first empty bench. After the school bell rang, he was unwittingly dragged towards the terrible corridor, as if the force of fear was forcing him to go, and with every step he took, his fear increased. The corridors were deserted, and he was completely alone. When he went to the end of the hall, suddenly the old barber appeared and fell down in front of him. Rosa hurriedly bent down in a dramatic gesture and began to collect the papers. Suddenly, the barber took his hand. Rosa looked at his face with a scream. The old man's black eyes were open, and he was staring at the papers that Rosa was collecting. Then, he slowly turned his eyes to convey a message to him. He seemed to be saying, "You know what to do?" He turned to the other side. The old man's eyes were closed and his lips breathed death. Rosa looked at the old man's other hand and noticed a key under it. While his fingers were trembling, he picked it up and the label was room number 13. Who was killed with the bravery of Rosa? This story was completely true, and I hope you enjoyed it. Room number 13. It was late Friday afternoon, and Rosa, who had recently traveled to Dito with her family, entered her new high school to register. There was no student in the yard, and the corridors were empty, and all the classes were empty, but everyone was at work. The manager told him that the class number is 12 and there is also a meeting hall and absence attendance. Rosa thought to herself and said that she would like to see what the 12th grade looks like. He started moving in the quiet corridors and the sound of his steps was echoed. Finally, he stopped at the last point of the hall for a moment, looking through the glass of the window inside the classroom. The many windows and the large classroom. When he turned his face from the 12th class, he noticed the sunlight shining on one of the corridor rooms. It was room number 13. He went and looked inside. The teacher's desk had created a distance between him and the light of the window. A man was bent over the desk. Well, he could not see the man. Suddenly, he turned his head unexpectedly. This movement surprised Rosa and made her dry on the spot, and she was still staring at the dark side of the man and could not recognize his face. He immediately left the front door. Maybe he was looking outside, and I thought he turned towards me. He took one last look at door number 13 and was about to leave. As soon as he turned around, he met an old man who was walking towards him in complete silence. While staring at the girl with his blue eyes, he said, "Go to this room and don't come back." Rosa hurried down the path without looking back. Rosa was going to school with her friend Mercedes, and she was telling her friend that the class number 13 I used to see was scary. Mercedes interrupted Rosa. "There is no such room at all." Rosa said, "But I saw the number 13 with my own eyes." Mercedes said, "You're wrong. There is no such class for the obvious reasons that the number 13 is unlucky." Mercedes said that these words are similar to Peter's words. He was expelled from school last year because he said that there is a spirit that marks exam papers.